Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of our CRE Innovation Series. I'm James Barlow from our Development Advisory team here at Altus Group, a leading provider in CRE intelligence. We connect data, analytics, applications, and expertise to power CRE performance. I'm excited to be your host today. In this episode, we're looking at innovation in real estate development and the latest technologies and strategies changing how projects are delivered. Today's guest, Martin Fenn, is tackling that firsthand. Martin is the Chief Delivery Officer at PT Blink, an Australian construction technology company using advanced offsite manufacturing and structural systems to rethink how multi-story buildings are built. You may have even seen them in the news for delivering a 7-story unit block in just 11 days. And I'm super keen to talk about that, Martin. We're so glad to have you here. Let's start at the beginning. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to PT Blink?
Yeah, good morning, James, and thanks for having me. My background, I've always been in construction. My father had a building company, so I'd always, in my school holidays, worked on building sites, worked as a labourer, and then I worked my way up to a carpenter. I went to university. University wasn't for me, so I went back on the tools. Worked my way through as a carpenter, carpentry subcontractor, and then a builder, and I had a joinery shop as well. So I understood construction and building, and then manufacturing being the joinery. I then moved on. So when I moved this side of the world, I went client-side project management and was solely focused on offsite construction. Right. Now, how I came into PT Blink, I got a message on LinkedIn from Wayne Larson, who's the CEO, saying, we're in a capital raise. If we get our capital, would you like to join? And I did, and I'm here today.
Fantastic. Great story. Thanks for sharing. Now, what sets PT Blink's approach apart from traditional development methods?
Look, I'd say our key value proposition is speed. You said we delivered a structure for a 7-story building in 11 days. Also, risk or de-risking for developers. So we take complex, high-risk works off-site, get that manufactured in a factory, and then also reducing the labour. So let's say if we isolate the PT Blink backbone, the structure, that's 5 riggers installing that. There's 1,000 square metres a day, up to 1,000 square metres a day. So significantly reducing the labour. They're also reducing risk as well.
Okay. That's very interesting, Martin. So we're talking about an absolute play of efficiency in a market at the moment that has got some productivity challenges.
Yes. Yeah. Productivity is pretty key. I mean, it's been all over the news, all over LinkedIn this week with key federal and state meetings about productivity, hasn't it?
Yeah. Very interesting. Now, what types of projects or partners tend to benefit most from PT Blink's approach?
So projects, for us, it's mid and high rise. So we typically, ideally above 3 to 4 stories and upwards. And then we would say, we're looking a lot at the residential market because obviously there's high demand there, particularly with build to rent. So any mid to high rise benefits from our solution, but also we're looking at data centers as well, because for data center providers, speed is key to them.
That's very interesting. And in an environment which has a significant challenge around housing supply, your timing may be exceptional, obviously. Next, I want to talk about MMC, or modern methods of construction, for those not familiar. Do you mind explaining what it means and how PT Blink fits into that landscape?
Yeah, modern methods of construction. I quite actually like that term and that acronym because it essentially means it's ever evolving. What we do 20 years from now will be quite different. But how PT Blink roll into that is, essentially with modern methods of construction, you're looking at efficiency gains, productivity gains. We're looking at being able to deliver rapidly with less labour. And also we try and do as much as we can off-site, so manufactured. because you're de-risking by taking essentially construction into an undercover facility. It's more efficient, less labour, and you've obviously got all the quality checks and balances conducted prior to it leaving the factory and coming on site.
That's very interesting. Let's dive into that a little bit more. What are some of the most exciting innovations in MMC and offsite manufacturing today?
Yeah, look, there's some stuff that is pretty out there, and then there's some stuff that is really pretty simple but works. One thing we are looking at is, so the PT Blink backbone is essentially in its temporary case structural steel. Yeah. Mm-hmm. When it gets rapidly erected on site, concrete is poured into the floor plates, into the columns as well, to create a composite system. So what we are looking at is the whole way through the construction lifecycle efficiencies. So we've been dealing with concreting companies who are looking at innovation to address problems or provide solutions. So some of the really cool stuff we've seen of late, particularly in Queensland, where there is a severe labour shortage and a lot of work going on, there's a company called Somero, a US company, and they've essentially mechanised concreting. So they've got some, they're not robots, by the way, they've got some pretty cool machines that are used as laser screeds, as line drags for pulling the concrete hose back. Significantly reduces the on-site labour, and it also reduces the amount of quality defects because they're using lasers to get the levels and the like. So a lot of people don't associate MMC with concreting, because a lot of people think with MMC you're essentially taking construction and putting it into a factory, or you're trying to apply robots or digital tools and AI, which you are as well. The approach by Somero and some of the concreters using it is a real practical response to MMC because it's here and now.
That's very interesting, Martin, because there is that labour shortage. And I know we're not the only ones feeling that. That's a global challenge, along with housing number challenges as well. So anything to sort of boost that productivity, as we were talking about prior, could be very exciting for the industry. Tell me about some of the myths that go around about off-site construction that you hear, or some of the challenges.
Yeah, some of the myths is full automation and robotics. Right. Yeah, look, it works, but there has to be a very considered approach before that. We've seen globally, but particularly in the UK, companies raising tens of millions, pumping tens of millions into fully automated factories, thinking that the first step is automation, which is wrong. And some of these companies gone bust, owing tens of millions. Automation and robotics certainly works, and there's some companies over here doing great stuff with it, but they've been on a very long journey before pumping that level of investment into their process, into their organization, because what they've had to do is learn the processes, get to fully understand their demand profile, build up a consistent pipeline, build up their organizational processes and procedures and the like, and then not the last step, but pretty far down the journey is the step into automation. And automation and robotics ain't the problem solver at the very beginning.
I've heard you talk at a number of events, and we've got a genuine interest in this part of the market as it's coming to fruition at the moment. Something you mentioned there is very interesting, and that is around the supply chain, where I think there's two schools of thought. And one is where people are requesting land to be released from government to start from the beginning to build these factories and have a pipeline in perpetuity, which gives them the confidence to invest. But what you're saying is there's opportunity to do this now through people that are already established in market.
Yeah. I think, you've hit the nail on the head. Pipeline, consistent pipeline, because that helps, if you set your demand profile and you have consistent pipeline, that gives the confidence and de-risks investment into full automation and robotics. Without that consistent pipeline, it's risky for companies to invest in full automation and robotics and the like.
Very interesting. Thanks, Martin. Now, beyond speed, how can MMC help with housing affordability, access, and long-term quality?
So there's the speed and also the productivity gains. So look, if we're looking at affordable housing or any type of housing, really it's simple economics, isn't it? If you can pump out supply to meet demand, by default, with simple economics, prices will go down.
Yes.
Then in terms of quality, construction has got a bad name for itself for quality. Look, I'm a tradesman originally, and the stuff I see is horrific. And construction is prone to human error. So if you are having components or entire buildings manufactured in a factory, it's in a controlled environment. You're also applying manufacturing quality assurance and quality control, QA, QC, opposed to building site, construction site quality controls and quality assurance. So, the two go hand in hand in that you can, for a manufactured approach, you can pump out a lot more houses, but you're applying a more stringent quality assurance and quality control over those. Whereas if we look at pumping out houses through traditional construction, conventional construction, you're at risk of diluting the quality because you're just trying to pump things out as quickly as possible.
That's very interesting. And just talking about speed as well, Martin, that's a big one at the moment. When we think about the cost of money, carrying that loan term for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
And so I'm assuming a lot of your customers have the ability to revisit their feasibilities to see what they may look like if they can produce a project far more quickly.
100%. And that is, part of the value proposition and the service provided by PT Blink is that we apply a dollar value to that time, to that speed. Right. Yeah, and also we were having a conversation earlier, weren't we, James, about escalation. And for example, if you focus escalation on, let's say, the Gold Coast, high-rise, mid to high-rise residential, you're looking at annual escalation rate of 7 to 7.5%, which is massive. So that you want to be getting your buildings up quickly to reduce that exposure to escalation as well.
Very interesting. Thanks, Martin. Are you seeing any sectors or regions where MMC is becoming the default approach rather than the exception?
Yeah, look, low-rise housing in the UK and Ireland is really moving towards that. And I would say low-rise social and affordable housing in regional areas, particularly with, they say Queensland, they seem to be taking on that MMC approach, particularly volumetric, because even though there's a labour shortage, full stop, but when you get over to those regional areas, there wasn't any labour there anyway, because it's middle of the bush or in areas where you've got low population, low densities.
Yeah. And just on that, is the pickup and the support coming mostly from government or private, just out of interest? Or a mixed approach? Because I know there's a lot of pressure on the Australian government to produce housing, but they're doing that mostly in combination with the private sector and the community housing providers. So is the adoption being considered broadly or potentially more in government than private, or both?
I would say both. The government, the Australian government, look, any government is going to be slow moving, but the Australian government certainly see a prefabricated approach, an MMC approach, as not the silver bullet, but a real way to address the housing crisis. Only a few years ago, I remember being approached by a couple of people going, Martin, do you think MMC and offsite construction is just a fad? And no, it's not. It's here to stay. We know it's here to stay because a lot of state governments and organisations have set up MMC task force, MMC teams, MMC leads within their organisation. So it shows they're taking it seriously. Now, a lot of developers and funders we speak to are really looking at MMC prefabrication as a way to deliver their portfolios. So I would say it's across both. Okay. The one thing we have to recognise is that governments have a different funding pathway to
Yes.
the private sector, which we can delve into later.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Martin. And tell me, how can data such as digital twins support long-term asset performance and decarbonisation?
Yeah, look, great question. Look at PT Blink. We really drive that digital approach, digital tools, because we will eventually be a software company. Now, I'm not showcasing our product and our service delivery, but it's to use for as context. So at the end of the project, essentially two assets are handed over to the client. The physical asset being
Yes.
the building, and
Yes.
then the digital asset being the digital twin. We call it the lifetime twin because it's for the lifetime of the building. So let's say if we focus on when the building's handed over, operation and maintenance. Now, this is a key component and a key consideration because
Yes.
if we look at building life cycle, 20% of the cost is construction, whereas 80% is on the operations and maintenance.
Yes.
If you have a digital twin and it's linked to sensors and the like within the building, you can significantly reduce the operation and maintenance costs on that building, which is where that 80% value hits. So for consideration, you're looking to really, in simple terms, you're looking at the client for FM facilities management,
Yes.
being able to apply planned maintenance opposed to reactive maintenance. And if we look at that from a regional context, when we're up in Darwin speaking to the Northern Territory government, in simple terms, they were telling us that it can cost up to $3,000 to replace a tap washer in a remote area because you'd have to get a plumber. The plumber's going to charge a premium. He's got to charter a plane and fly there. So when you look at reactive versus planned maintenance in that context, it makes serious sense.
Very interesting. Now, recently, Altus Group's pointed out that in many high-performing buildings, embodied carbon, the emissions from making and building the materials, now outweighs the carbon from operating the building. From your perspective, how can PT Blink's approach in particular help reduce those upfront emissions, especially since they're often locked in before construction even begins?
I mean, we have to watch not getting caught with the hype of green concrete, green steel, and that's all great and it does work, and there's some great projects using it. But if we're looking at a typical context where you might have limited supply chain or there may be durability concerns or all of those put together, what we say at PT Blink is, so with our backbone structure, it's a composite structure. Now, we stress the steel, so we significantly increase the bearing capacity of the steel to take the wet load of the concrete. So by doing that, or with composite structures full stop, you're reducing the amount of concrete by about 20 to 25% reduced opposed to a traditional or conventional post-tension concrete. So you've reduced the concrete. For a manufactured efficient approach, you're reducing the amount of waste. Construction is notorious for waste. So much going into landfill. If you're manufacturing, you're more efficient. With a more efficient approach, you're reducing the amount of wasted product that goes into the landfill. Also through offsite manufacturing, offsite construction, you're reducing the amount of deliveries to site. You're reducing the amount of returns backwards and forwards. You're reducing the amount of labour who are turning up to site in their utes. So by default, without really the byproduct is carbon emission savings as a result of being really efficient.
That's very interesting, Martin. I assume there are some other savings there as far as from transportation point of view, blocking streets and the like when we talk about efficiencies also. That's very interesting. Are you seeing stronger demand from developers or investors for low carbon construction methodologies?
I would say both, because a lot of organisations now have ESG mandates that they have to achieve. Yes. So that's both the developers and the investors. Now, with the investors, and the fund and funders as well, there's often impact investors or green money. So that money can only be utilised in, let's say, when there's an ESG mandate, or when they know that development is an environmental conscious development. So in order to get, the only way they can get the money is through having a green development, as it were.
Sure. And let's have a look at more of an oceanic or more local lens here. Compared to other markets globally, and we touched on this earlier, where does Australia sit in terms of MMC maturity? And I've been fortunate, as I've mentioned, to listen to you speak at a number of events, and your accent gives you away also, that we think there is some greater maturity in other sectors, in other markets globally. And so just touch on that and where you think Australia needs to head to see some more maturity.
Yeah, look, compared to, let's say, the UK, for example, yes. Australia was considered quite immature in terms of MMC. However, look, the construction sector is a key component of our GDP. Well, construction is a big, profitable sector in Australia. Australia is a new country, and I see Australia's really becoming mature fast with their MMC approach. And the UK, initially, we used to look to the UK for this shining beacon of, being a very mature MMC-led market. And now Australia is very quickly catching up with that.
Is that right? That's fascinating. And not only from driving for those efficiencies, but I assume that's also from pressure for delivery. We've got an Olympics forthcoming with very significant housing targets that are respectfully lagging. I'm sure they'll want to make some time there. And so they'll be looking for innovation like this, you think, moving forward, or they must seek this type of innovation to hit those targets.
That's the only way, isn't it? Because face it, we've got a declining workforce.
Yes.
More people are retiring than school leavers entering the industry. I think it's by about, depends which report you read, by between 5 and 8% attrition rate.
Yes. And I believe there's also age is a factor there, where we have a lot of those, the retirees coming through the sector as at that age group of 50 to 50 plus now. We're potentially looking to retire in the next few years as well. So adding to that need for this type of innovation. Martin, have you seen any global models or delivery frameworks that you think Australia could benefit from adopting?
Yeah, I would say let's say in the UK, where on certain portfolios, they are mandating MMC. Yeah. But when I say mandating, there'll be an MC approach, and then they essentially, to break that down, they put on what's called a PMV, so pre-manufactured value of a certain percentage. And the contractors have to achieve that percentage. So it may not be a fully, call it a volumetric approach where you've got a high level of PMV, but it could be hybrid approaches and the like. And look, by the government mandating, it's setting the scene for innovation, because a lot of the main contractors won't innovate. It's difficult for main contractors to innovate when they're on low single-digit margins. There isn't the spare capital available to invest in R&D and innovation. But if the government set the mandates, they're encouraging the industry to innovate and deliver differently.
That's very interesting. And I'm guessing if the government does mandate, and we see that sort of more broadly into this market, then that also would give lenders confidence as well into the sector.
Yeah, the lenders are getting more confident, and we've seen a lot of the big four who are notoriously risk averse looking towards MMC. But yeah, I think there still has to be a lot of work for obvious reasons to gain lender confidence and lender acceptance with MMC, because there are still lenders out there who will not lend against the offsite construction.
Yeah, I sense that is a fast-changing environment, and you're right at the edge of that, and that may overlap into this next question. But as PT Blink continues to grow, what's one industry mindset you think needs to shift to truly unlock the impact of this approach?
Great question. It's innovation and construction It is very, very hard. And I think a lot of it is let's say, the larger tiered, the main contractors.
Yes.
And look, it's hard for them to change. They're big organizations. They have certain risk profiles and the like. We have to see main contractors evolve. We have to see also, I'd like to say, we have to see, I suppose it's the whole mindset of construction. It's notorious for being very adversarial. And we see a lot of insolvencies for various reasons, both main contractor and subcontractor. So I really think the shift as well needs to be not just main contractors, but it needs to be holistically the procurement approach. Now, with modern methods of construction, essentially needs modern methods of procurement. And what we're seeing is that even when we're evolving with MMC, the contracts aren't necessarily, or the procurement models aren't necessarily keeping pace with the construction typology. So that's where we're getting a bit of a mismatch, particularly when it comes to payment. And payment, money makes the world go round. And if organizations aren't getting paid when they need to, that's only going to increase the insolvency rate or the lack of appetite to adopt.
Martin, tell me, what is the most exciting project that you've been part of? And obviously, we've mentioned an incredibly swift project at the beginning that's got some tremendous media. Certainly here in Australia, and has been across a number of major news channels. Just tell us about that one as well, please.
Oh, so you're talking about the Spring Hill project. So that project, it was delivered in almost half the time. So that was, I think it was 30 to 54 apartments. It's a 10-story building and 7 stories were blinked. Yeah. So look, I wasn't part of the project, but I'm very familiar with it. And essentially it was the PT blink structure going up in 11 days that saved the day. That made that project feasible and go ahead. Yeah, the project was delivered as a result of the PT blink backbone in 8 months, which is fast.
It's certainly got to get the market's attention, and I've seen the video of that build, and I have to say it's incredibly impressive.
Yeah, it's quick, isn't it?
It is. It's very exciting for industry, and I'm not surprised you're getting such great traction at the moment. Tell me, a closing question here. What's one thing you hope PT Blink will be known for in 5 or 10 years from now?
I would like to say, and I don't want to be too moonshot at this, but I would like to say transforming the way mid and high-rise buildings are delivered.
Right. That could be across various sectors, couldn't it? I know we've got a housing crisis here, and we have that in other parts of the globe as well. Canada comes to mind.
We're going to have also what we're going to have, or what Brisbane and Queensland's going to have. It's not just a housing crisis. We're going to have a hotel crisis with the Olympics.
Yes, leading into the Olympics.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Well, thank you, Martin, and thank you for joining us for our 5th episode of our CRE Innovation Series. We hope you enjoyed this discussion with Martin Fenn from PT Blink. You can follow Martin Fenn, that's Fenn, on LinkedIn to keep up with the latest innovations in MMC. If you found this conversation insightful, be sure to like and subscribe. And stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll explore more areas of innovation in CRE.
Thanks, James, and thanks to the Altus team. And it was a pleasure to be on this. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Great to have you on, Martin. Thanks again.